Welcome back to Legacy Builders, everybody. We have some special guests on today. We're excited to hear from Scott and Brooke, but I'm going to let Madison introduce our guests today.
So these two people, like, we sat down and I was just like, man, we've got to have this powerful couple on because I look up to them so much. And out there nowadays, I feel like there's a few role models for what really good parents look like. And I would say these two are it. They're powerful individuals. Scott's got his own business. He has the best brisket in Tennessee.
The best.
It's so good. Brooke is just one of the strongest people I've ever met. And yeah, I'm just so excited. They're both so kind, funny, and I'm excited to get into this conversation with these two amazing people today. So or anything else to add?
No, I just echo everything that you said. I mean, we're growing up, building foundation. You're kind of on our legacy and foundation. And, for me, when I needed role models myself, I mean, I had role models, I had people I looked up to. So it's exciting that Madison has, role models right now to look up to. And so we're just excited to hear y'all's story. Yeah. Thank you so much for being on with us.
We're so grateful for you guys to be on today.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we're so excited.
Honored to be on here.
So just to start, tell us a little bit about where you're from, your family's growing up, and where you're at today.
Sure. Yeah. You want to start?
Sure. So we are actually from the same hometown of Middleport, New York, which is, we just tell people we're from Buffalo. It's easier that way, but it's a very, very small town. Everybody knows everybody.
Yep.
Everybody talks. It's kind of like a Mayberry, I guess, outside Buffalo. But I would say, to describe my childhood, I would say my childhood was very normal. I grew up in a really loving home. We traveled a lot. We had a lot of experiences together. I have a lot of siblings. Holidays were always very fun. But I would say that there was a turning point around the time that I was 15. My older sister had passed away, and my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer in the same year. And suddenly everyone was forced to grow up in that time period. And I think hindsight is 2020, because now, looking back on my childhood, you start to see maybe where it wasn't so perfect, where there were some cracks, where there is tension in certain relationships, or emotional issues between relationships. So, I mean, I love my parents to death, but there's no family is perfect. There's things that, I wish had been done differently. But overall, I mean, yeah, it was a really good childhood.
What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I'm the youngest of four siblings. So I have the little youngest syndrome, and and I'm also a pastor's kid. My dad pastored a church in Middleport for 35 years. And my siblings were all a little bit older than me. So my next oldest brother was 5 years older than me. My sister 8, and then 10. My other brother. So I was definitely the youngest. And but we had a great family. Like Brooke said, it's every family has its issues, but did grow up in a great home. The church was across the driveway. I feel like I lived in church, which being a pastor's kid always comes with its own things. Like, I feel like I didn't grow up listening to a pastor. I grew up listening to my dad. So there's everything that comes with that. Definitely had my wild side, like a lot of PKs do. And but yeah, growing up though, I mean, it's funny living in Nashville here, we find ourselves getting further and further away from the city. And I think that really comes from where we grew up, like out in the country and having more space and privacy. You grew up with horses, and we had dogs growing up, and space, and that kind of plays into a lot of my love of the outdoors, and like you said, like my barbecue business. You can't have fires in the city, but out here where we live, you can do it up and no one cares. But similarly to Brooke though, my kind of a little family history too. My mom also had breast cancer when I was in high school, around the same, in the same
Around the
year,
same time, yeah.
around the same time her
Oh,
mom.
wow.
Yeah.
And you guys knew each other at that point, right?
So we dated in high school for like a year and a half, 2 years, kind of. Yeah, and I'm a year and a half older than her, so there was a couple of grade difference there. But we did break up my senior year. You know, she was just immature. It's
Right, yes. Two sides to every story.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of like where we grew up. And
What brought you to Nashville?
That's a funny story. So we were not together at the time. We had both graduated high school, he 2 years before me. But I went to Belmont University, graduated from there. In my freshman year, I had moved down in the fall of 2008. And by February of 2009, he actually moved down for music. So not for me, but he ended up coming down the same year. And he's been down here ever since.
Yeah, I've been here for 12 years. Yeah, I was, I guess, in my sophomore year of college, and I had an opportunity to play with an artist around the country some. And after doing that and being on the road playing bass guitar, I was like, I'm not going back to school. Are you kidding me? I'm going to Nashville. Right? That's what I did. And, I moved down here a week after I turned 21. And
Okay.
I started playing around town and just learning all the things I was good at, all the things I was not good at, going from a small town to a city, it's always very humbling. And, but yeah, I mean, it's home to me now. I'll always claim Buffalo, go Bills, but Nashville's definitely my home, for 12 years now, it's been that.
So how many years ago did you guys rekindle the relationship and everything?
We 2016
we started talking again in 2016. I had just gotten out of a relationship that was very serious, and he was in the midst of ending a pretty serious relationship. And at that time we just started talking as friends. We hadn't really talked in years, but I had still maintained friendship with his mom and his dad, because our families were very close when we were in high school. And so that's when we started talking. We didn't start dating until 2017. And at the time I was still living in New York. I had moved back up there after college. And by that summer I was like, I want to move back down to Nashville. And I had Audrey. She was 4, almost 5 at the time. And I just knew, I mean, we knew even in high school, like we wanted to get married. We were like, oh my gosh, only 7 more years until we can get married. Like, and whatnot. But anyways, it's just amazing that God had reintroduced us, in a sense. And I mean, I knew if I moved back down to Nashville and things were continuing to progress, like we were going to get married. And so I moved down the summer of 2017. We got engaged in the fall and we got married in March. I mean, it was very quick once I had moved back down.
Well, when you know each other for so long, then I feel like
the history made it so easy. I mean, I always tell her, I'm like, of anybody that I dated throughout my 20s or my teens after her, like, I wish them all the best, but I never really cared after that, like whatever was going on in their lives. But she was the one person that, no matter where I was at in life, that I really just always, I thought of her and always just hoped that she was doing well and always wished the best for her, and wanted to like know that she was doing well. Anybody else, sayonara,
What's so interesting that you just said too is that your families were so close and everything. And so growing up in your family and also seeing how each other kind of grew up, what are some things like legacy wise that because we're in our legacy series. But what are some things that you, as you've started creating this family, that you want to pass down to your kids? And then what are some things that you're like, I just want to shift a little bit and we want to change our family this way? I know that's a big question. But.
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind for us, and this itself can go much deeper as well, but to like directly answer your question, one thing that we wish, speaking of children, one thing that that's our youngest, Hans, he's almost 2. So we wish that our parents, and also not just our parents, but our church community, and at the time, like the culture and youth groups and everything, would have been more, I guess, forthright and more communicated better with us, just about how real life is, and not skirt around uncomfortable topics like sex, or that was honestly maybe the big thing. I mean, it was around the purity culture, which, I mean, purity is obviously a great thing and super important, but instead of just having real life conversations with us and being like, hey, here's the things you're going to struggle with, here's why, or even when it comes to that, or even just drugs, alcohol, money, whatever it is, things that people have to at some point face in their lives and make a decision for themselves. We just wish there would have been a much more honest conversation. So early on after we had rekindled and we're talking about life and our families and how would we want to raise kids, and Audrey, that was very important to us, that from a young age, still remaining age appropriate, just be very honest with them and not hide our past from them like our parents did. There's things as adults we find out that our parents struggled with when they were our age or younger or older, that were like, that would have been really nice to know. We would have been able to relate. We would have maybe, I don't know if it would have changed the outcome, but at least would have made me more comfortable to talk to my parents about things that were going on in my life. So we've definitely committed to being open and honest with our children about not just life and hard topics and just kind of the way it is, but also the things that we've experienced and our shortcomings. But the beauty of all of that is that it can all be wrapped in, the love of Jesus. And so it's not just, hey, here's what I experienced, but here's how redeeming that was. And here's also the consequences of that decision, both in the real world and spiritually, and that's just incredibly important to us, that we are the safest place for our kids. They may not always choose to come to us, but I for sure want to make sure that they know that they can, and they won't be judged harshly or get a finger pointed in their face, but just be met with love, understanding. And it, would never mean that we're not disappointed by any means, but it's super important that they understand where we come from, and that hey, we've been there, so I understand.
Yeah, man, that's so good. I mean, I just know, coming from a perspective of somebody whose parent did do that, how important that is from for the kid, to be able to go with those vulnerabilities and stuff and just share those and not be judged by your parent is so just refreshing. And I mean, you guys are doing an amazing job at that. Audrey is she's 8, right? 8 years old. And she is just she's so mature, and the fact that she comes to you guys and trusts you with some of her fears already and some of these deeper conversations that I've actually been able to witness, babysitting them, has been so cool, just to hear about. And so you guys are doing an amazing job with that as well. But yeah, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. I was like, exactly what you described was exactly what, when I was in your shoes at that age, those are the things that I desired to do with my children. And Madison just attested to that environment. So that is very, keep it up, keep that environment, keep going, because your kids will appreciate it, and it will turn out developing very, very strong, healthy children.
Yeah.
And also just being in your guys' house, you've really created this environment of peace and like love between siblings and everything. Have you realized that you're creating that environment? Are you intentional about that?
Actually, the time that I realized we had created the environment and I was really thankful was actually we were about to move out of our townhouse at the time. And we were renting, and the guy we were renting it from, he was getting the place prepared to sell. And the woman that came in to look at the house and eventually bought it, she was a very wealthy woman from Kentucky and had very high standards. And when she walked in, I was a little nervous. All of our stuff was still around and everything. And I guess part of me was like, oh gosh, I wonder what she's going to think of our home.
Yeah, they were buying it for her son.
Yeah,
and his new wife to be.
Yeah, but what she meant as a kind of a dig initially when she came into the home, I took as like a very deep compliment. And she said, wow, your home is filled with so much love. And I was like, I will take it. And no, but like to that point, I think we are pretty intentional about that. Like our house is not what we envision long term, but it's the environment that we're more focused on.
Right.
And little by little we'll get to all of the remodels and all the things and whatever. But right now it's more important that they see us being creative. We're baking, we're cooking, we're doing music or playing guitar or sewing. Like there's so many different creative outlets that are being poured into our lives in the home. And we try to play games with the kids and play with them. And, we're getting outside and working in the garden and like all of these things. Like they know that pretty much anything that we do in our home, they're all things that we can do together. It's not forced on anybody, but like they are things that like everyone's welcome to participate. And we just try to keep a really open home. Like our mission statement when we met with our and sat down with our premarital coaches, was that we wanted our home to be a fortress for other people. And so when I think of a fortress, I think of a place that is safe. It's a refuge, but it's also a place of provision, a place of gathering. And we wanted to make sure that any person we encountered in our marriage, in our home, never left our home feeling empty-handed, meaning that we did what we could to give of our time, of our finances, of whatever it was that the Lord placed on our heart, that we said yes, and we met that in some way. We just want people to make sure like that they're filled when they leave our home.
Yeah.
Tell me more about you. You had mentioned that you guys have a mission statement. So I want to pick your brain a little bit on that, because couples your age don't have mission statements. And
and it's one thing to create a mission statement in premarital counseling, but it's another thing to still keep that in mind and still be acting upon that. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I think it really boils down to having our home be open. We do a lot of different gatherings. Like ever since we got together, we've had people that didn't have places to go for holidays come into our home and we've had someone spend Christmas with us. We've had someone several people spend Easter or Thanksgiving. We just make it known to whoever we are in contact with, like, hey, our home is always open. If you want to come over, if you want to like enjoy our holiday together, or, we do worship nights in our home. It's about gathering together and just pouring into one another.
So where did the idea of a mission statement come from?
I think it was like homework, wasn't it?
It was homework. It was, we were tasked to create a mission statement. And so we sat down and, kind of thought it through, talked it through. But I think it came pretty quickly because of all the things we talk about. We always talked about wanting to make sure our home was like open for people. And, you know, I know I had a family growing up that was like that, you know, I could just walk over to their home and walk right in their door and always be welcomed and loved. And we have made so many great memories there as family, as friends, as kids, adults. And like, I always want that for our home, you know. And I think regardless of where we're at, you know, whether we're doing great financially or not great financially in any given month or whatever, you don't have to, that doesn't dictate what our home is, you know. And and it's actually been there's been a few times where, you know, we're either in a place where we've been stressed, or if we had an argument or something, that mission statement has kind of been a foundation for us.
Nice.
Been like, hey, like, it doesn't matter what we have, or if X, Y, and Z situation, our home is a safe place. And like, that's all that matters.
And we always have something to give. Like, we just always do. And if anything, when we are feeling super stressed or kind of, you know, at the bottom of the barrel sometimes, like, that's, even when we are in those positions, when we pour out, we feel like we're also being poured into. It's amazing how that has happened to us so many different times. But since we're talking about legacy, we also, I feel like both of our families were very good at that in different ways. Like, my parents were always incredibly generous, specifically financially. That was just something they were able to do very often, and they did it willingly, and with a lot of joy. Your family and my family, they always had big celebrations, whether it was for family and extended family, or like your parents always had a big Christmas party for the entire church. My family always had a giant Christmas party. Like, there were always things like that we were surrounded by growing up. And I think that influenced us as well.
I guess the one thing that's important too is that it's not just a open door for people that we really like, or people who have something to give, offer, or are, you know, well known or anything, or of a certain title, but just anybody, you know. And it's the people that maybe we would have the least likely thought to come over, or maybe at times we're maybe not even looking forward to it, but like, oh, okay, you know, this is what we're here for, you know. But then those are the times we feel the most loved and learn the most and gain the most. And that's just super important. I feel like we've always had a soft spot for the people who are maybe not quite as, I don't know what the word I'm looking for. There's not as not the popular kids, or the people who maybe get picked on more, or whatever it is. Like, we've always had a place for those people, and a lot of just love and compassion.
Yeah, and I think also with legacy, that is one of my favorite things, the spirit of adoption, and also that those are my two favorite things about Scott. Because when we were in high school, there was a kid that I don't know, I mean, he was kind of picked on. He was definitely singled out a lot. And Scotty, I think without even meaning to, most of the time, just loved him so well and paid him so much attention. I mean, like, you took him to the mall to go Christmas shopping one time, like with his family. And, you know, you would sit down at lunch with him when he was by himself, and all this stuff. And like, Scotty was a popular kid in school, but he just broke the mold. Like, he just made it a point to always love on this kid. And I love that, because I'm also seeing in Audrey, ever since she was a toddler, she has had this incredible gift of compassion. And
I was actually just going to ask about that, is just Audrey being in, like, I know we've talked about that and her having the gift of compassion. Will you kind of expound on how you've protected that gift and wanted to cultivate it like more?
Yeah, I mean, I see it in her all the time. I mean, it's in the little things of like, oh, so-and-so forgot their snack at school, so I gave them mine. Or we took her to see, she was like 4 years old, and we took her to see Wonder Woman, and we thought she'd be terrified of like the battle scenes. And The only time she cried during the movie was at the beginning, spoiler alert, when Diana is like watching her aunt die or something, and like just tears running down her face. I mean, she's just always been so incredibly compassionate with her friends, with people she doesn't know, people who are singled out. And I love that in her. So anytime I see it, I just try to encourage it as much as I can. It's a beautiful quality.
Yeah, we also have many times, as we ask her about, she's in gymnastics, so we'll ask her about how things are going there or in her classroom. But there's many times we've asked her, like, hey, are there any kids that maybe don't get talked to as much, that maybe they get picked on some? And sometimes she's like, yeah, and she's like, yeah, I talk to them. We try to encourage her, like,
Yeah.
If you can, go out of your way and like, make friends, or you just make them feel a part in any way you can, and she's never been like, oh, okay. She's like, okay, yeah, like happy to, and which is a blessing because we would encourage it regardless. But the fact that it's natural for her. I will say, parenting wise, the one thing we're maybe not great at is at what age kids watch certain movies. But
I know, 4 years old, watch Wonder Woman.
The issue I had growing up as the youngest, I grew up watching like Terminator 2 and Aliens when I was like 5 or 6 years old. It's like, young.
Oh man. But yeah, I mean, obviously compassion is a value in your guys' family that you have. What are some of the other like values that, as you guys are just learning this process, starting out your family, what are some of the other values that you find you have?
I would say generosity, compassion, love, any fruit of the spirit, aim for it. I would also say that, like, as far as the legacies we hope to pass down, I think it's also, as much as it's the same for both of them, it's also a little different for each of them. And what I mean by that is, for Audrey, and part of it stems out of just our own personal experiences.
Yeah.
But for Audrey, I want her to know that she can be strong and independent, and like she is 100% empowered to be that, and that we want her to feel comfortable coming to us and talking to us, and that she is she has permission to speak up, and because of her compassion, like when she notices injustices or what have you, like be the person that steps forward and speaks up. And that part of that is playing off of her strengths, but also because of what I went through and just knowing her story. And for Hans, kind of in the same breath, like of course I want him to be strong and independent and things like that too, but the boys will be boys thing doesn't fly in our home. Like that won't be used as an excuse for him to get away with certain
That's good.
things. So for
So
him,
good.
I want him to be empowered to be kind and gentle and break the mold of maybe what boys are expected to be like. And he's not even 2 yet, so we're gonna see how his personality starts to grow. Right now we know that he is
Chaos.
a little wild. He's so loving at the same time.
Yeah.
So we're kind of feeling him out still. But yeah, I mean, and like I said, that's kind of based off of what we have experienced in our lives as well.
Yeah. To piggyback off that, for me, on top of those things, which are, we were just very, very much on the same page about, I want our kids to love, and I like love is very, it's kind of cliche, but to truly love everyone where they're at, whether they agree with their lifestyle or whatever they're doing, but just to love them and let them know that they're there for them and they're willing to be heard. That's super important to us, as well as to communicate, like is to communicate often and to communicate, what am I trying to get out here?
Well, I mean,
What
we've
did I
talked
say?
about like being willing to communicate with people even if you don't agree.
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
other
yeah.
person
Oh,
as well.
confrontation is, don't be afraid of
Yeah.
healthy confrontation,
Yep.
but also be, you know, ready to communicate anytime. Like there's many things that we wish we would
Mhm.
have confronted sooner instead of letting them, you know, fester or whatever it is, whether it's in our relationship
Mhm.
or friendships or, you know, work, what have you. So for us, like, that's, I feel like there's a lot of respect that plays into that for other people by being able to communicate with them and being able to confront, um really anything. Like if it's placed in their heart, finding a way to have healthy confrontation
In love.
in love, and I feel like you just get so much further faster by
Yeah.
finding out how to do that in a healthy way instead of running from it,
Mhm.
because it can just create much bigger issues long term by running from confrontation. So that's something that we really try to, instill in
Yeah.
Audrey and when they Hans, you know.
Yeah.
So what does that process look like? What does it look like because obviously Hans is still really, really young, but like for Audrey, how do you like address that healthy confrontation?
Actually, I have a
Go
good
ahead.
example of that. She's gonna
Oh, no.
kill me if I say this. So there was a time she had a crush on a boy. Remember, she had a crush, and we were, I think,
Kindergarten,
we were like,
first grade,
yeah, it was like
I don't know.
kindergarten or something, and we were like teasing her or something. We were like, oh, who's this? Who's this boy you like? And she felt really like uncomfortable. And I remember telling her like, hey, if you're uncomfortable with what we're saying right now, like this is a good time. We're going to teach you right now. I want to hear you say, please stop. That makes me feel uncomfortable. And it was a little weird at first, but eventually she was like, please stop. That makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yep.
And we did. And we were like, that's a good example of when you see something that maybe you don't like just, you can do it in love, but this is how you confront it. Like,
Yeah.
in that case, please stop. That makes me feel uncomfortable.
As well, yeah, there's other times too. I mean, I guess we try to show her them through our example, you know, and if there is a conflict, say between Audrey and I, making sure we each have a chance to speak. It's not just, I'm going to come down on you, drop the hammer for your misbehavior, but I will also hear you out, and giving her that chance. And that's empowered her at times where, like, if I was frustrated about something, whatever, so there's times where she would just come to me and be like, I just want you to know, this is why I did this, blah, 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 you know, and I'm like, okay, wow, actually, I didn't know that mommy gave you permission for that, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's maybe uncomfortable for her, but she's definitely learned that confrontation is good. And it's, I think because we definitely encourage it, you know.
Yeah. That's awesome. I know too, Brooke, we were at coffee the other day and you talked kind of just about like how when they're at that 2-year-old stage is kind of like the mirror image stage. And talk to us a little bit about that and what it looked like with Audrey and you, and now how it's looking like with Hans.
Oh man, I still remember nights when I would like go to put her to bed, or I was frustrated by something or whatever it was, and it wouldn't take long. It would take like a few minutes, and suddenly I started seeing her either respond the same exact way or she would do the same thing I had done, and it was like, whoa, oh my gosh, she's doing this because she just saw me do it. Like, that's terrifying. And like, it's good when she, you know, replicates maybe good qualities, but when she's not, or when she's replicating things that maybe I don't want her to be doing or saying, then it's a reality check of like, wow, I didn't even realize I was doing that, but I'm literally seeing a 3-year-old version of me play it back. And yeah, maybe that sounds a little sassier than I thought, you know, and it just kind of clicks all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Hans hasn't gotten to anything really alarming yet, but he'll say things that were like, oh yeah, he's using that same inflection in his tone or in his voice because that's how we say it. And it's just interesting to catch on to that.
One thing that's funny with Hans is in our family, we call it, the guys have the Gypson rage, which
it's a real thing.
For me, like I am incredibly patient, almost to a fault with people. And like you could just be the worst to me and it will just, I'm unfazed. I'll be super patient, you know, which is really good for her. And but with things, you know, if like a drawer doesn't open or whatever, just like right there. And I see that in Hans, where he gets, I just hear him, he's like, I can hear in the other room, he can't get his toy bin out, and he just screams, "Ah!" and just like rips it, you know. And so I'm like, oh, man, you know, I think now it's trying to catch it early, and I like, instead of yelling at him to be like, hey, you need to calm down, whatever, but like go to him and like physically like calm him down, like, hey, it's okay, it's not worth being upset about, like let's gently open these things, you know. And there's times we do have to discipline him for being aggressive or, you know, hitting Audrey when he shouldn't, or, you know, he's 2 almost. But yeah, I think it's so interesting. And he, you know, if you're sweeping, he wants to sweep. If you're, you know, cleaning up, he wants to clean up. Anything. If it doesn't matter what you're doing, he wants to do the exact same thing you're doing.
Yeah.
And it really kind of makes you think twice about what you're doing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we also got into some conversation beforehand where we started just talking about business a little bit, and I want to dive into that just a little bit. Well, so we just went over like a components episode where we kind of did like an intro to parenting, an intro to business and stuff like that. So we'd love to have you guys on again to kind of dive more into that parenting world, but let's just dive into the business side of things a little bit. So before we start talking about how you just in business, you got to start with what you have, where you're at, and how our set is not actually as pretty as it looks on the screen. And so, Dad, I don't know if you want to address that a little bit because you have some more business experience, and then Scott as well, who has a business as well. So if you guys want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, just it's cool to see even like you know you guys, young couple, and you know starting businesses. I mean, I've been business minded, entrepreneur the whole time, and so many times it's hard to juggle family and business at the same time. And and even with our podcast, you know, we don't have to wait till everything's perfect. We can just start do with what you have, where you're at, and just get going. Just start with it. And so maybe share a little bit about that. You know, business. One of the things that we talk about as a component in our legacy stuff that we'll have a whole series on is, you know, just business and real estate type of stuff. I mean, we're big advocates of, you know, of doing something for yourself, creating a family legacy. And man, we just have Tennessee Smokehouse up and running in the Gypson household is awesome. So tell us how that came about, and you know what it's like having business now as part of your family legacy.
Yeah. So to kind of preface all of it, and Brooke is very, very quiet. I guess, in my perspective, Brooke's very quiet about her work and doesn't talk about it a whole lot, but she also owns her own business. And like, I wouldn't be able to pursue Tennessee Smokehouse and my business if it wasn't for her. And you've been part owner of your own business for 9 years now, and she's in the finance world with her dad, and she just works her butt off. And for me, like, she's helped me pull that entrepreneur out of me. I am not by any means a natural born entrepreneur. I realized, speaking of just business and life in general, like that was some of my biggest downfalls as a musician in my early 20s, is that I never treated that like a business. I was playing music, I was having fun. Surely opportunities will just shower upon me, and the doors will just always be open, you know, because that's all I had experienced, you know, as in middle school, high school, college, whatever. But if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't really be able to pursue Tennessee Smokehouse from a financial standpoint. I did a lot of other side, always had a full-time job, and most recently up to when I left my job, which was doing home remodeling, bath and kitchen remodeling. Yeah, I always had a job. So when that kind of got to a breaking point with that, she really encouraged me of like, hey, well, like, let's pursue this. You should absolutely go after that. It's a dream of yours. You're passionate about it. And at the time, Tennessee Smokehouse was just a hobby. Like, I had bought the name and LLC for it a couple of years prior. But because I always knew, I was like, I want to do something with this. I didn't want to work for somebody else forever. And I saw that in her, the freedom that she had, and which also comes with its ups and downs, like amazing months, amazing years, and not so amazing months or amazing years, just because it's, you know, there's a lot of, you know, hills and valleys with owning your own business. But for me, it was really that Brooke who set the example of what being a business owner was. She works so incredibly hard. And like, for me, I feel like I'm always just trying to keep up and match her level. And it's taken me a little while to get Tennessee Smokehouse to where it is. I feel like I probably could have had it there like a year or so ago if I really dug deep and listened to all the great advice that she's. Yeah, you're welcome. But I think we actually both come from an interesting situation where, I mean, your dad has owned his own business forever,
like 36 years.
Yeah.
Or something, yeah.
So you grew up with your dad being able to be around some, and I know you described it like, well, how you describe his time.
Yeah, I mean, my dad, he'll always say, I never missed a concert, I never missed a track meet, any of the things you guys were involved in. But what you guys didn't see is that sometimes I went back to the office at 7 o'clock at night to get work done, or meet with a client on the weekend, or something like that. And so I feel like being an entrepreneur is so incredibly rewarding, because you have flexibility and freedom of your schedule and some of the decision-making things and things like that. But it's also incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things that Scott spent a lot of time working on for himself, and has done a really good job, it didn't come naturally to him at first, was having the self-discipline to work from home with kids running around. And 2020 just made that even more intense. But having the self-discipline, like for me, that was difficult for several years, to have the self-discipline to be like, okay, I know I'm working from home or in a home environment right now. I don't need to unload the dishwasher. I don't need to get sucked into this project or that project. Like, stay focused. And that's just, it comes with time. And but I think you've done really, really well at that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Just got to carry on there. So her dad is that way. My dad, being a pastor, his office was across the driveway. He also had a home office. So like my mom was a stay-at-home mom. Once I was in like elementary school, she started working more. She substitute taught a lot. She was originally a music teacher for a school. She plays piano, but she taught piano lessons out of her home, and she was, you know, substitute teaching at the school and being an accompanist for concerts and recitals and all these things. But I guess what I'm getting at is I grew up with both parents in the home a lot more than a lot of kids get to enjoy. I mean, during the summer, it's not like both my parents were gone to work and then I was just on my own or at some day camp. We were all just home. And, you know, my dad would be for sure busy, whether it was preparing a message or a Bible study or visiting people in the hospital, doing weddings and funerals, and, you know, just a lot. It was a small church, you know, so there wasn't as many people making decisions. So there was a lot that he himself would have to do. But yeah, I mean, I think that really kind of set the framework up for us, that if we had to paint our picture for our lives, it doesn't look like we're gone. Like we're here. And if we want to, which has its, its hard moments, but when the kids are off school, like we kind of take that as like, we're off too. And like, we're going to take our family time. If we want to go do business up in New York, closer to her family for a month, we can go do that and we can make it work. And the flexibility of that is, it's worth fighting for, and it's worth working very hard for. And it allowed us, like during 2020, when we had to make the decision to either send Audrey to school in the environment that it was that year or homeschool, or we decided to homeschool. And that was very, very difficult. But
10-10 would not recommend for us ever again.
For a lot of people, but it allowed us to, thank God, like give her the education that she needed without having to go to school and worry about all the things that were happening during that time. I mean, for a second grader to go to school where they can't sit next to their friends and they have to be masked all day long, it was just like, she's way too creative and fun. She just wouldn't do well. So because we own our own businesses and we're hustling, it afforded us the opportunity to both be at home and take on those responsibilities while working. And
and do your kids ever have to come along for the ride or anything like that?
They absolutely do. Especially when it was just you and Audrey up in New York, like you tell, I love it.
I mean, I love it. I love even thinking about those times because I get motivated thinking about how I was and how Audrey was when it was just the two of us. But yeah, so I was a single mom for 5 years. But in that time, I say that Audrey was raised by a village because she was. I had a lot of help from my mom and my sister specifically. But if they weren't around or if they couldn't help out watching her when I had to work or whatever, then it was on me. And at the time, I was paying off hospital debt and student loans and like trying to get my life together and all these things that like paying for daycare or a babysitter was just out of the question. So part of it was out of necessity, but the other part of it was I came to find that I really enjoyed parenting that way. So when it came to working out of my office up in New York, she came with me. Or I think I told Madison the story of like, I was still training for marathons and I was training for triathlons, and that's a big time commitment. And my mom wasn't going to be able to watch her every time that I had to train. So there were some mornings that I would wake her up at like 5:30 in the morning and I'd pull her out of bed in her cute, like zip up sleepy pajamas. And I'd put her in the car seat and we would head to Newfane, which was about 20-25 minutes away. And when she was really little, I would bring her in the car seat and just set the car seat at the end of the pool. And I would do my laps. And when I was done, we'd go into the locker room and leave. But when she got older, she was about 3, I would put her in her puddle jumper and she'd just sit at the end of the pool and wait for me to finish doing what I was doing. And by the end, she would get in for a little bit. We'd swim around together. And then we'd be home by 7:30, have breakfast, get ready for work, and she'd come with me. Like it just, even my friends knew if there was like a friends gathering, if my mom or my sister couldn't watch her, then you got Brooke and Audrey. I mean, it was like Lorelai and Rory Gilmore. I mean, it was a thing. But what's cool is that I've kind of been, now that Hans is getting a little bit older and he's not in the baby stage anymore, he's entering the toddler stage, which is my favorite stage, period. And I'm finding that I'm able to do those things even now. Like I feel like it's easy to get a little bit lazier about those things. Like, I don't want to go to the grocery store with kids. Like, can you just watch them? Because there's somebody here now that I can rely on more than just my mom or my sister. But when I truly embrace those moments where I'm like, no, come on, like today was a perfect example. He had to work until about 4:30, 5 o'clock, and I wanted to get a 3-mile run in. Well, my only options were to take them with me. So we headed down to the park, and I had Hans in the stroller for 3 miles, and Audrey was on her scooter, and we just knocked it out and came home. And like, you just,
one of the things I really love is your intention that you said, and we talked about behind that, was just that when you have kids, for your life not to end, for you to still discover you and discover your purpose, but your kids have to be along for the ride and the journey so that they can see you discovering purpose, so that they can see you building legacy, and building business and all of that. And so talk to us just a little bit on that, because I love that you said that.
Yeah, I actually, I shared with Scott last night as we were kind of discussing these things. It was important for me to have Audrey, especially at that time, because of everything that we had experienced together, even without her knowing it. It was important to me that she see me not just when I'm crossing a finish line, either physically or literally or metaphorically. Like, I wanted her to also see me when I was really pushing, like training, gutting it out. So she would see me when I was training, or she would see me work late. I mean, when she was a toddler, I got all of my licenses when she was a toddler. I would put her to bed and I would study late at night. And sometimes, the amount of times she would wake up and just not go to bed, or she would come into my room. Like, she would come into my room and she'd see me just at my desk, just studying away. Like, I wanted her to be involved and see me still striving for my dreams, my passions, because I want to encourage that in her too. Like, she knows without a shadow of a doubt that whatever she is passionate about, we are behind her 100%.
Yeah.
And like, gymnastics is a perfect example. It's a massive time commitment. It is a financial commitment, but we have told her, like, hey, we are here for as far as you want to take this. The minute that you say, hey, this isn't for me anymore, like, let us know. But until that happens, like, we are behind you 100%. Like, we will get the right people. We will, do all the things. So, I mean, it's just, I guess in a way we kind of set the tone for that, for her life, and eventually for Hans as he starts pursuing things that he's passionate about.
Yeah, I think what's super important about that too is the example that is set. And I know, like, specifically with gymnastics, we'll take her to there, and there's nothing wrong with this. A lot of parents will stay and like watch the entire thing. And there's been many times she's like, hey, can you like come in and watch me, stay for practice? We're like, no, like, I gotta go to work. And she understands. Sometimes we will, kind of try to catch the tail end of it. But she understands. We've explained to her of like, hey, like, you're doing gymnastics because we're able to afford it. And the only way we can afford that is if we are also working. And for her to see us pursue our passions, or to know that, like, hey, yeah, after gymnastics, yeah, we got to go, like, for me, like, we got to go pick up some meat. We got to go do this. Like, it's just, you're along for the ride just as much as I'm along for your ride and the things that you're passionate about. Like, I'm here with you, you're here with me. But also, like, we make sure we haven't missed a gymnastics competition. And it's also exciting for us. It's like, hey, we haven't seen her do all this. We get to see her progression, and it's like, it's super exciting.
Yeah.
And all that. But I think more than anything, it's the example that's set, that if you want to pursue an instrument, she's like, oh, I'm interested in that. We're like, okay, well, yeah, let's do it, but don't be just willy-nilly about it. Like, let's pursue it, but
I will say with that, we made it very, very clear early in our marriage, and even before that, when it was just her and I, that, like, I will not be a taxi driver. So, right now you're only 8. Like, let's stick to one thing. Let's be all in. And if you say, hey, that's not for me anymore, cool. Like we'll, finish it out, but then we'll be done with that and you can pursue something else. But, she's not going to be in, or Hans, they're not going to be in like 8 things at once. It's too much. And, we still have our lives and things that we want to pursue and a marriage to invest into. And that's why like bedtime around here, unless it's a special occasion or we have friends over or a weekend, like we take bedtime seriously. Like 8:00, you are in your room, lights out, it's bedtime.
Yeah.
Cry it out, read a book, whatever. But like it's bedtime, because from 8 to 10:30, like that's our time. Like that's when we get to invest into like spending time together or working on projects or it's just like we also need our time.
Yeah, we can't lose ourselves for our kids. It's like completely backwards to thinking. Like we have to be ourselves for our kids. And if we're not being creative, if we're not pursuing the things that we love, we absolutely will not be the best versions of ourselves to our kids in terms of parenting, our patience, our the example we set. Like they will see a shell of who we really are. And there's times, and like I've heard from my family some that like we criticize for being very, very busy, or like we do a lot, but it's kind of like we do a little for everybody, and we make sure that everybody has their chance and opportunity to live and to thrive and to pursue the things they love. Otherwise, I mean, like what are we doing here? It's so
you guys have gave just some great advice throughout this episode, and I'm so thankful and grateful. We're so thankful and grateful that you guys have joined us today, and thank you for all of your words of wisdom and for sharing your story. To wrap up a little bit, we're going to ask, just like we ask all our guests, what's a piece of advice that you would give to the next generation, or the greatest lesson that you've learned this far in your life?
The first thing that came to my mind when you said the greatest lesson you've learned in life is to not wait. I think for me, looking back over the last, 12, 13 years of being an adult, I waited far too long to pursue the things I wanted to pursue, or to end a relationship I should have ended, or whatever it is. But I'm a natural born procrastinator. That's probably why the entrepreneur side is like, so, but I look back, I wish I just wouldn't have waited or been afraid to pursue the thing that seemed unpursuable or unattainable, because it absolutely is, whether it's a business or, somebody amazing. It's just go after it. I mean, the worst case that happens is you don't get it, but you already didn't have it, so you don't lose anything.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I would say take time to slow down. I think for a long time I was just like, I was like hustling, or I was like running after things or whatever, that there were so many times. He's a procrastinator, I'm a planner. So a lot of times I was like way out ahead of myself, or I would be planning things like so far down the road, or be so focused on planning ahead that I never truly got to experience what I was in. And I think as you get older, you start to realize like just how quickly time goes by, and to really just like embrace the moment or the situation or the circumstances that you're in. I think, and just slow down. I
think even if the situation is maybe not your ideal, being able to still find joy where you're at, and especially just generally speaking, living where we live, meaning like in the country we live in. I mean, we're so blessed to have the families we have, and there's so much access to church and all these amazing things that like you're doing okay. And there's not to say there aren't people who struggle or have hardships, but I guess in our lives, we've been blessed that like even our hardest times, like to look around, slow down and know that what we have is amazing. And even though we're unsure of what tomorrow holds, like we are so incredibly blessed. It's okay to find joy in this and to love today and look forward and to prepare for tomorrow. So
that's so good. So good. Well, thank you guys so much again for being on Legacy Builders podcast. Tell us like where we can find Tennessee Smokehouse and that brisket and all of that, and Brooke, where we can find you and more about you.
Yeah. So TN Smokehouse, that's everything, whether it's tnsmokehouse.com or at TN Smokehouse, that's where you're gonna find it. So like, right now we're doing pop-ups. I just did a big event in Smyrna the other day. There's thousands of people, super fun. We do deliveries and catering, but I'm in the process currently of looking to get funding for a food truck. That's been the latest of the last couple of weeks. It's ready to go to that next level. So that's where we're at. So hopefully you'll be able to find me all over Nashville and the surrounding areas.
Yeah.
So we're getting there. Yeah, we're working. We're not procrastinating.
Oh man. And Brooke, where can we find you?
My business is a little more old school. We're not exactly like out there.
Well, just like you and like personally as well. Like your Instagram, where we can find more of your wisdom and
just my name, Brooke Gypson.
Yeah.
Facebook, Instagram, all the things.
Awesome.
Your business card,
Yeah. And we'll link all this stuff below so people don't have to like remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again for being on, and thanks again everybody for tuning into Legacy Builders Podcast.
Thanks so much for joining us today on Legacy Builders Podcast. Make sure to share this episode with your friends and family. And remember, today is a great day to start building your legacy.